John Mitchell stood in the kitchen of the home he had renovated with his own hands, running his fingers along the granite countertop he'd installed 3 summers ago. 15 years of marriage to Emily had taught him patience, a virtue he'd needed in abundance when dealing with her family. He remembered the first time he'd met Emily at State College. She was the pretty girl from the wealthy family who somehow saw something in him that others missed. "You're real," she'd told him on their 3rd date. "Everyone I know is playing a part in some ridiculous social drama. But you're just you." The irony wasn't lost on John now. At 42, he'd spent over a decade trying to be something he wasn't for her family's approval. His father had been a carpenter, a man with calloused hands and an unwavering moral compass. "Respect is earned, son," he'd say, "not inherited." That lesson had served John well as he built his construction management business from nothing. Emily had once admired that about him. Her own father, Richard Ashworth, corporate lawyer and self-proclaimed pillar of society, measured worth by bank accounts and family names. John poured himself a whiskey and gazed around the kitchen. The pendant lights he'd installed cast a warm glow over the space. Everything in this room represented hours of his labor, a physical manifestation of his love for Emily. Love that increasingly felt one-sided. They had no children, a fact that sometimes kept him awake at night. Emily always claimed she wasn't ready, that they had time, that her interior design business needed to stabilize first. But John suspected Margaret Ashworth's influence. He'd overheard his mother-in-law once telling Emily that mixing bloodlines would be such a shame. The memory of their last family dinner made his jaw clench. Richard had spent the evening discussing the blue-collar mentality as if it were a psychological disorder, while Margaret reminisced about the refined young men Emily had dated before John. Emily had squeezed his hand under the table and whispered, "They don't mean anything by it," but her defense stopped there. John had gradually found reasons to miss these gatherings. Working late became preferable to enduring 3 hours of subtle degradation. The pattern became predictable. Emily would return from these dinners distant and critical, as if her parents' poison lingered in her system, infecting their marriage for days afterward. Recently, though, Emily had been pushing harder for his attendance. "They're really trying to be better, John," she'd insisted last week, a brittle smile on her face. "I've been planning something special, something that will change everything." The sound of keys in the front door pulled John from his thoughts. Emily appeared in the doorway, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with an almost manic energy. "John, I need to tell you something important," she said, setting down her purse and checking her phone quickly before turning to him. "Mom and Dad are hosting a very important family dinner next Friday. I need you there. It's going to change everything between you and my family. Forever." John noticed how she checked her phone again, a secretive smile playing across her lips. Something about her nervous excitement felt different this time. Rehearsed somehow. "Dangerous. Whatever you say, Em," he replied, raising his glass in mock toast. "I wouldn't miss it for the world." Over the next 7 days, John watched Emily with growing unease. 15 years of marriage had made him fluent in her moods and habits, and something had shifted dramatically. The changes were subtle at first. Her phone constantly flipped face down, hushed conversations that ended abruptly when he entered a room, vague explanations for extended absences. On Tuesday, she claimed she'd spent 3 hours at a fabric store selecting materials for a client. When he asked to see the samples, she stammered that she'd left them at the office. "I'll bring them home tomorrow," she added hastily, not meeting his eyes. On Wednesday, she said she'd had lunch with her friend Caroline, but when John mentioned it casually to Caroline's husband at the gym, he learned Caroline had been out of town all week. "Caroline, she's been in Chicago since Monday," Paul had said with a confused frown. "Some design conference." The lies were piling up, each one sloppier than the last. What troubled John most was the guilt-driven affection. Emily had cooked his favorite meals 3 nights in a row. She suggested a weekend getaway to the mountain cabin they hadn't visited in years. She'd become effusive in her apologies for her parents' behavior, repeatedly insisting they were finally ready to accept him. "My parents have changed, John," she'd said just yesterday, her eyes darting away from his. "They realize how wrong they've been about you all these years." 20 years in construction had taught John to trust his instincts. When a support beam didn't look right, you didn't ignore the feeling. You investigated before the whole structure came crashing down. His marriage was showing hairline fractures, and Emily's behavior was the seismic activity preceding collapse. Thursday night, John returned early from a job site. Emily was hunched over her laptop at the dining table, so engrossed she didn't hear him enter. He caught a glimpse of what looked like a law firm's website before she slammed the laptop closed. "You startled me," she exclaimed, her voice unnaturally high. "Sorry," John said, setting down his thermos. "Anything interesting?" "Just research. For a client's lease agreement," she said too quickly, her fingers nervously tapping the closed laptop. "How was your day?" Later that night, he heard her on the phone in the bathroom, voice barely audible over the running water. "Yes, Mother, he'll be there," she whispered. "Everything is set up exactly like we discussed." The following morning, while searching for aspirin in Emily's purse, John found a business card. Alexander Dawson, private investigator. The card was worn at the edges as if handled frequently. "What's this?" he asked when Emily entered the kitchen, holding up the card between 2 fingers. She froze momentarily before forcing a laugh. "Oh, that silly thing. It fell out of a magazine at the salon. I thought the name sounded like a character from a detective novel," she explained, taking the card from his hand and tossing it in the trash with deliberate casualness. That night, as they lay in bed, Emily rolled toward him, her expression serious. "After the dinner tomorrow, we should discuss our future," she said, tracing her finger along his arm. "It's time to make some big decisions about our lives." "What kind of decisions?" John asked, studying her face in the dim light from the street lamp outside. "Important ones," she said, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I feel like we're at a crossroads, don't you?" John nodded, his suspicion hardening into certainty. "Crossroads," he repeated. "That's exactly where we are." Later, as Emily slept beside him, John stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. His wife was planning something, and whatever it was, her parents were involved. The dinner tomorrow wasn't a reconciliation. It was an ambush. He considered refusing to go, but Emily's recent desperation suggested this was crucial to whatever she had planned. She needed him there. Despite his growing paranoia, a small part of him still hoped for an innocent explanation. That hope died when he overheard Emily's phone call the next morning. Standing outside the bedroom door, he heard her whisper, "He'll be there tomorrow. Everything is ready. After this, there's no going back." "I ran into Diane this morning," John said casually, as Emily hurried around the kitchen the day before the dinner. "She mentioned the yoga studio on Pine Street has been closed for renovations. For weeks, apparently." Emily's hand stilled on the coffee mug she'd been washing. "Diane must be confused. I was just there yesterday," she responded, her back still turned to him. "That's what I thought," John nodded, watching her closely. "So I drove by. There's a big closed for renovations sign. Has been since early last month, according to the dates." The color drained from Emily's face as she slowly turned around. I meant the one on Oakwood, not Pine," she stammered, her eyes flickering toward the door as if calculating an escape route. John pulled out his phone. "That's weird because I checked our credit card statement. You've been charging yoga classes at Pine Street Yoga every Tuesday and Thursday," he continued, scrolling through the screen, keeping his voice neutral. "But there are also charges at the Westfield Hotel on those same afternoons. And purchases at Barton's Menswear, items that aren't my size." Emily's coffee mug slipped from her hands, shattering against the sink. "It's not... I can explain," she gasped, pressing her palms against her eyes, shoulders heaving. After a moment, she looked up, tears streaming down her face. "I've been meeting with someone," she admitted, her voice breaking. John felt ice in his veins, despite having suspected this. "Who?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "A marriage counselor," she said quickly, wiping away tears. "I wanted to surprise you. He specializes in family dynamics and in-law relationships. I've been seeing him at the hotel because I didn't want you to know I thought our marriage needed help." "And the clothes?" he questioned, his gaze unwavering. "A birthday gift for Daddy," she whispered, unable to meet his eyes. "I wanted something special for him this year." John studied his wife's face, the face he'd woken up to for 15 years. Her explanation was plausible, but her delivery felt rehearsed. Her eyes darted away when she mentioned her father, and she twisted her wedding ring anxiously. Her tell when she was lying. "I see," he said finally, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Emily crossed the kitchen and clutched his hands. "Please don't be angry. Tomorrow's dinner is so important," she pleaded. "I've been working with this counselor to create the perfect environment for reconciliation with my parents. They're finally ready to accept you." Her desperation was palpable. This was the third time she'd confirmed his attendance at the dinner, even offering to buy him a new suit for the occasion. "After tomorrow night," she kept saying, "all our problems will be handled. Everything will be different." John squeezed her hands and smiled reassuringly. "I'll be there, Em, don't worry," he assured her, his voice gentle despite the storm raging inside him. Relief washed over her face, but the anxiety lingered in her eyes. After Emily left for what she claimed was a client meeting, John opened his laptop and logged into their joint email account. He found what he was looking for almost immediately, a notification for a voicemail from a number he didn't recognize. Delivered to their shared virtual assistant service, he played the message. "Mrs. Mitchell, this is Sandra from Keller and Associates. Mr. Burke wanted me to inform you that we've prepared the documents as requested. We're finalizing everything to ensure maximum advantage in the situation you described. Please confirm your appointment for Thursday to review before Friday's event. We need your signature to proceed as planned." John sat motionless for several minutes after the message ended. The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. There was no marriage counselor, no reconciliation dinner. Emily was planning to blindside him with divorce papers at her parents' house, a public humiliation designed to catch him off guard. The strategic timing made sense now. Friday was the end of the financial quarter. His business had just completed 3 major projects with substantial payouts. The Ashworths had always seen him as a temporary inconvenience in their daughter's life. Now they were helping her extract maximum value before discarding him. John's hands trembled as he picked up his phone, not with fear, but with a cold, controlled fury. He dialed a number. "Mike? It's John Mitchell," he said when the line connected. "Remember when you said you owed me a favor after I rebuilt your cabin? I need it now. I understand you're still working as a PI. I need a rush job. Everything you can find on my wife's activities over the past 3 months. Yes, Emily. And I need it before tomorrow night." His next call was to his college roommate, now a senior partner at a law firm across town. "Paul, I need your help." "Tonight, if possible," he explained, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "It's about protecting my assets." "Yes, it's as bad as it sounds." Finally, he called his father. "Dad, remember those copies of my legal documents you insisted on keeping in your fireproof safe? I need you to overnight me the prenup that Emily's parents made us sign," he requested. "Yes, that one. The ironclad agreement they were so smug about. It's about to become very important." As John ended the call, he heard Emily's car in the driveway. He cleared his browser history, closed his laptop, and took a deep breath. When she entered, he greeted her with a smile that revealed nothing of what he now knew. "I've decided to attend the dinner tomorrow," he said calmly, watching her reaction carefully. "You're right. It's time to resolve things with your family." Emily's expression flickered between relief and something darker, fear perhaps, or guilt. "Thank you," she whispered, avoiding his gaze. I'm sorry for what's about to happen, but it's for the best. Yes, John agreed, his voice steady. I believe it will be. The overnight package from John's father arrived at 10 a.m., a thick envelope containing the prenuptial agreement that Richard Ashworth had insisted upon 15 years ago. John remembered Richard's smug expression as he'd slid the document across the table. Just a formality to protect my daughter's interests. John spread the pages across his home office desk, reviewing the terms with fresh eyes. The agreement had been designed to protect Emily from John's potential failures, a safety net for the wealthy heiress gambling on a blue-collar husband. The irony was exquisite. The infidelity clause was explicit. Adultery by either party would forfeit their claim to the other's premarital assets, business interests, and even jointly acquired property if the betrayed spouse had contributed more than 60% of the purchase or improvement value. John had renovated their entire house with his own hands. Under the agreement, Emily would lose everything. His phone rang. Mike Conway, the PI. John, I've got everything. It's worse than you thought. Much worse, Mike informed him, his voice grim. An hour later, John sat in Mike's cluttered office, staring at dozens of photographs spread across the desk. Emily and a man identified as Gavin Brooks, entering hotel rooms, embracing in a restaurant alcove, walking hand in hand through a park on the other side of town. The timestamps showed a relationship spanning at least 4 months. Gavin Brooks, Mike explained, shuffling through his notes. 45 tech entrepreneur, recently divorced, wealth estimated at $50 million. Member of the Oak Ridge Country Club, same as your in-laws. They know him socially, John murmured, picking up a photo of Emily laughing as she fed Gavin a bite of dessert. Mike's expression darkened. They know him intimately. Your in-laws have hosted him for dinner at least 12 times in the past year, he revealed. Based on my sources, they've been actively facilitating this relationship. John's jaw tightened. You mean they've been playing matchmaker while I'm still married to their daughter? Exactly, Mike confirmed. He slid a small digital recorder across the desk. You should listen to this. My associate placed a legal recording device in a public space where your wife and mother-in-law were meeting. Everything captured is admissible. They were speaking loudly in a restaurant booth with no reasonable expectation of privacy. John pressed play. Is everything arranged for Friday? Margaret Ashworth's clipped tones were unmistakable. Yes, Mother. The papers will be ready. John has agreed to come. Emily's voice sounded strained. Perfect. Richard believes that presenting him with divorce papers in front of the family will make him more likely to accept his fate gracefully. Men like him value their pride above all. He won't want to make a scene. I still don't understand why it has to be so public. Emily sounded uncertain. Because, Margaret's voice hardened, ripping the bandage off quickly is kindest. And having witnesses ensures he behaves appropriately. Gavin will be waiting to hear the news. He's quite eager to make things official with you. I know. A pause. I just wish— Stop it, Emily. You've been wishing for 15 years. It's time to correct your mistake. Your father and I have arranged everything. John won't fight the terms. He doesn't have the resources or connections. By this time next week, this unfortunate chapter will be closed. The recording ended. John sat motionless, the final pieces falling into place. There's one more thing, Mike said quietly. Your wife has been meeting with a high-end divorce attorney for weeks. They've drafted papers seeking alimony based on your recent business success and claiming she contributed significantly to your company's growth through her connections and social capital. John laughed, a short, harsh sound. They have no idea what they're walking into, he remarked, his eyes cold. What are you going to do? Mike asked, leaning forward. Exactly what they're expecting, John replied, gathering the photographs into a neat stack. I'm going to attend their dinner. I'm going to listen to their carefully rehearsed speech. And then, he smiled thinly, I'm going to teach the Ashworth family about consequences. John spent the rest of the day preparing his counterattack. He met with his attorney, reviewing the prenuptial agreement and preparing counter-divorce filings citing adultery with documentary evidence. He contacted his accountant to protect his business assets. He compiled a folder containing copies of the photographs, financial records documenting Emily's secret spending, and transcripts of the recorded conversations. When he returned home that evening, Emily was waiting with nervous energy, alternating between clingy affection and distant distraction. "I picked up your suit from the dry cleaner," she said, hanging it prominently on the bedroom door. "And I've made reservations for us next weekend at that mountain resort you love. I thought we could use some time away. After tomorrow," she added, her voice catching slightly on the last words. "Sounds perfect," John replied, watching her check her phone for the dozenth time that evening. "Do you still love me, John?" she asked suddenly, her eyes searching his face. John considered the woman before him, this stranger wearing his wife's face. For 15 years he'd loved her completely. Now he felt nothing but a cold, clear purpose. "I've always loved you, Emily," he said truthfully. "More than you'll ever know." She burst into tears, burying her face against his chest. "I don't deserve you," she sobbed, her words muffled against his shirt. John held her, his expression unchanging as he gazed over her head at their wedding photo on the dresser. Tomorrow would be the end of that marriage, but it wouldn't end the way Emily and her family had planned. The Ashworth mansion looked exactly as it always had, imposing, immaculate, and coldly unwelcoming. John pulled his truck into the circular driveway, parking deliberately between Richard's Bentley and Margaret's Mercedes. Emily had insisted they drive separately, claiming she needed to help her mother prepare. John now understood she wanted separate vehicles for their drive home, or more accurately, for his drive home alone. Margaret opened the door, her smile tight and formal. "John, how nice you could join us," she greeted, her gaze flickering to his suit, perfectly tailored but purchased off the rack 3 years ago. The slight wrinkling of her nose communicated her judgment more effectively than words. "Wouldn't miss it," John replied pleasantly, stepping past her into the marble foyer. The dining room had been set with elaborate precision, the finest Ashworth china, crystal stemware, and freshly polished silver. Place cards positioned John at the farthest end from Richard, who sat at the head of the table with an air of feudal authority. Emily sat rigidly between her parents, checking her watch repeatedly. Her eyes darted nervously to the elegant envelope beside her plate. "So, John," Richard began after the first course had been served, breaking the tense silence. "Still managing those construction projects." He pronounced construction as if it were a communicable disease. "Still building things, Richard," John replied evenly. "Someone has to." Margaret sipped her wine delicately. "Indeed, some people are naturally suited for such physical pursuits," she remarked. "Others, of course, are more comfortable in refined society." She turned to Emily with pointed significance. "Wouldn't you agree, dear?" Emily stared at her plate, pushing food around without eating. "Everyone has different strengths," she murmured, not looking up. "Speaking of strength in different areas," Richard continued, refilling his wine glass, "did Emily mention we had dinner with Gavin Brooks last week? Remarkable fellow. His tech company just secured another round of financing. What was it, 50 million? He paused, glancing at his wife. Such a shame about his divorce, though it's left him available for new opportunities. He looked meaningfully at Emily, who flinched. "Gavin sounds fascinating," John remarked, taking a bite of his salad. "You must introduce us sometime." Margaret's eyebrows rose slightly at his calm response. "Perhaps. Though I'm not certain you'd have much in common," she observed coldly. "Gavin attended Harvard. His family has a summer home in the Hamptons. He understands the obligations of society. Unlike some people we could mention," Richard added with a chuckle, swirling the wine in his glass. John smiled and took a sip of water. "You know, Richard, I've always appreciated your directness," he commented. 15 years of subtle insults. It takes commitment to maintain that level of condescension. A brief silence fell over the table. Emily's face paled. Richard cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Now, John," Margaret interjected, her voice honeyed with false concern. "No one is insulting you. We've simply always wanted what's best for Emily. Surely you can understand that?" "Of course," John nodded. "Parents wanting what's best for their children is natural, though I've often wondered why you think the worst thing that could happen." to your daughter is happiness with someone who actually loves her. Emily's hands shook, visibly as she reached for her water glass. Richard's jaw tightened, but he maintained his practiced smile. The main course arrived, prime rib for the men, poached salmon for the women. Margaret steered the conversation toward safer topics: renovations at the country club, the latest charity gala, mutual acquaintances whose children had made advantageous marriages. John participated politely, complimenting Margaret's hosting and thanking Richard for his unsolicited career advice. His calm demeanor seemed to unnerve them. They had expected defensive anger or wounded pride, not this pleasant acquiescence. As dessert was served, a delicate lemon soufflé that John knew was Emily's favorite, Margaret exchanged meaningful glances with Richard. He nodded almost imperceptibly, and Emily's breathing quickened. She reached for her purse with trembling hands and withdrew the elegant envelope John had noticed earlier. "John," she began, her voice barely audible, "I have something for you. A gift that will change everything." The dining room fell silent except for the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. John accepted the envelope with an expression of polite curiosity, though he knew exactly what it contained. He opened it slowly, removing the legal documents and scanning them with furrowed brows, as if encountering such papers for the first time. Emily's carefully rehearsed speech tumbled out in a rush. "I've been thinking a lot about our marriage, John, about how people grow and change, sometimes in different directions," she explained, her voice cracking slightly. "I've realized that I need something different, someone more compatible with my goals and background." "What Emily means," Margaret interrupted impatiently, setting down her dessert fork with a sharp clink, "is that she's finally come to her senses. This marriage was always a mistake, a youthful rebellion against proper upbringing." Richard nodded sagely. "You must have known this day would come, John," he stated with condescending sympathy. "Emily was meant for a different world than yours. It's best to bow out gracefully and avoid embarrassing yourself by fighting the inevitable. Breeding will tell in the end," Margaret added with cruel finality. "You never belonged in our world, John. You should be grateful for the years you had with Emily. But it's time to accept reality." John remained silent, studying the divorce papers with meticulous care. The tension in the room grew unbearable as the seconds ticked by. Emily's expression shifted from nervous anticipation to confused discomfort at his lack of reaction. Finally, John carefully folded the documents and placed them beside his plate. He took a sip of water and dabbed his lips with his napkin. "Since we're exchanging gifts tonight," he said calmly, reaching into his jacket pocket, "I have something for the family as well." He placed a small red gift box in the center of the table. Emily's face went white with sudden terror, as if she had just realized that her quiet, humble husband might not be as naive as they all believed. Richard Ashworth reached for the red box with theatrical confidence. "How thoughtful, John," he remarked, his tone suggesting he expected to find some pathetic peace offering inside, perhaps a handwritten letter of surrender or a sentimental keepsake. The box opened with a soft click. Richard's expression shifted from smug curiosity to stunned horror in an instant. The color drained from his face as he lifted a photograph from the top of a thick stack of documents. The image, crystal clear and date-stamped, showed Emily and Gavin Brooks embracing passionately outside a hotel room. "What is this?" Richard whispered, though his expression made it clear he already knew. Margaret snatched the folder from her husband's limp grasp, her social composure crumbling as she flipped through photograph after photograph. This can't be," she spluttered, each image confirming her daughter's betrayal and their own complicity. How did you, Emily stuttered, her voice barely audible as she stared at the evidence of her affair spread across the table. John maintained his calm demeanor, taking another sip of water before responding. "You assumed I was too stupid or too weak to protect myself," he said quietly. "That was your first mistake. You see, I've had months to prepare for this moment. Every hotel visit, every lie, every secret phone call, I documented it all." He turned to Richard, whose face had flushed from shock to anger. "There's more in that folder you might find interesting. Financial records showing Emily's secret spending on her affair, transcripts of recorded conversations, legally obtained, I assure you, planning my humiliation tonight, and documentation proving the timeline of the affair." Margaret's hands trembled as she continued flipping through the evidence. This is an invasion of privacy," she sputtered indignantly. "We'll sue you for—" "For what?" John interrupted, his voice sharp for the first time that evening. "For legally documenting my wife's adultery? I think you'll find that difficult to pursue, especially given what else is in that folder." John withdrew another document from his inner pocket and placed it on the table. "Do you recognize this, Richard?" "It's the prenuptial agreement you insisted on 15 years ago," he explained calmly. "You were so concerned about protecting Emily from my uncertain prospects that you created an ironclad contract. Ironically, it protects me instead." He tapped a paragraph highlighted in yellow. Section 8.3. In the event of proven infidelity by either party, the offending spouse forfeits all claims to the other's premarital assets, business interests, and jointly acquired property if the betrayed spouse contributed more than 60% to the purchase or improvement value. Richard's legal mind processed the implications immediately. "That's our house," he muttered, his voice hollow as realization dawned. "Correct," John confirmed with a slight nod. "The house I renovated entirely with my own hands, adding more than double its original value. My construction business, which was established before our marriage. Even my father's property that I inherited." His voice remained steady. "Emily gets nothing." Emily's composure finally shattered completely. "John, please," she sobbed, reaching across the table toward him. "I never meant for it to go this far. They pushed me toward Gavin, convinced me you were holding me back. They promised to support me through the divorce. I made a terrible mistake." "The mistake," John cut in. His eyes locked on hers, "wasn't the affair, Emily. It was allowing your parents to convince you that love and loyalty are less important than social status and family connections. It was believing that I would simply crumble when confronted with your betrayal." Richard slammed his fist on the table, causing the crystal to rattle. "This is absurd," he growled. "I have connections with every major law firm in this city. You can't possibly think you'll win against us." "I don't need to win against you, Richard. I've already won," John replied with quiet confidence. He reached into his pocket again and produced a letter from his attorney. "This outlines the ironclad nature of our case. I filed counter-divorce papers citing adultery this morning. Copies of all evidence have already been sent to my attorney, your country club board of directors, and several prominent members of your social circle." Margaret gasped, her social mask cracking completely. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed, her face contorted with fury. "I already have," John replied simply. "Your attempt to destroy me quietly has guaranteed your very public destruction instead." Emily looked between her parents and John, the full magnitude of their miscalculation finally dawning on her. "But what about us? 15 years of marriage," she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "Ended the moment you decided I wasn't good enough for you," John finished for her. "The moment you conspired with your parents to humiliate me. The moment you chose Gavin Brooks over the man who has loved you unconditionally for 15 years. He stood up, straightening his off-the-rack suit with dignity. "You spent 15 years trying to convince me I wasn't good enough for your family. Tonight you've proven you were right, but not in the way you intended. I was always too good for this family." As John walked toward the door, Richard found his voice again. "This isn't over, Mitchell." "You have no idea who you're dealing with," he threatened, rising from his chair. John paused in the doorway, turning back one last time. "Actually, Richard, I know exactly who I'm dealing with now. That's why I've already won." Emily rushed after him, tears streaming down her face. "John, please, you can't just leave like this." "We need to talk about this," she begged, grabbing his arm. "There's nothing left to say, Emily. You made your choice," John responded, his voice softening slightly. "I hope someday you realize what you threw away for your parents' approval, and a man who'll discard you the moment this scandal breaks." As he walked out the front door, John could hear Margaret's hysterical voice on the phone. "Police! Yes, I need to report stolen documents, personal property taken from my home," she shrieked. John smiled grimly as he slid into his truck. The officers would arrive to find a family in chaos, with evidence of adultery spread across their dining table. Margaret's impulsive call would only publicize their humiliation further. As he drove away from the Ashworth mansion for the last time, John felt no triumph, no vindication, only a profound relief that the charade was finally over. 6 months later, John stood at the windows of his new apartment, a sleek high-rise unit with clean lines and uncluttered surfaces. Gone were the ornate furnishings Emily had insisted on, replaced with modern, functional pieces that suited his preferences. The morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the space that had become his sanctuary. The divorce had proceeded exactly as his lawyer predicted. Emily's adultery, thoroughly documented and witnessed, made the legal proceedings swift and decisive. The prenuptial agreement, originally designed to protect the Ashworths' precious daughter, had instead left her with precisely what they had specified 15 years earlier: nothing. John sipped his coffee, watching the city come alive 20 floors below. The aftermath had been both swift and devastating for the Ashworth family. The country club board, comprised mostly of conservative families who prized reputation above all else, had quietly asked Richard and Margaret to withdraw their membership. Emily's affair had become the scandal of the season, made worse by evidence that her parents had actively facilitated her infidelity. Richard's law firm, concerned about the potential impact on their client relationships, had suggested an early retirement package, which he'd had no choice but to accept. Margaret's carefully cultivated social circle had abandoned her completely, unable to overlook both the adultery and the family's public humiliation. Emily had moved back to her parents' mansion, her interior design career in shambles. The scandal had cost her most of her high society clients, who couldn't risk association with such impropriety. Gavin Brooks, the tech entrepreneur who'd been so attentive during their secret affair, had ended their relationship within days of the public exposure. His company was pursuing an IPO, and a scandal involving adultery didn't fit his image as a responsible corporate leader. The irony wasn't lost on John. The family that had spent 15 years looking down on him from their perceived social height had fallen completely, destroyed by their own arrogance and deception. Meanwhile, John had thrived. His construction business had actually benefited from the scandal. The story of a hard-working man betrayed by his socialite wife and her elitist family had resonated with many of his blue-collar clients. He'd secured 3 major commercial contracts in the past month alone. His personal life had taken an unexpected turn as well. He'd met Sarah, a kindergarten teacher, at a friend's barbecue 2 months ago. Their relationship was still new, but refreshingly honest. She appreciated his work ethic and straightforward nature without needing her parents' approval or social validation. John's phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. Emily's number, again. Her 7th call this month. He clicked play, his expression impassive as her voice filled the room. "John, it's me. Please call me back," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I've been thinking about everything. About us. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Gavin is gone, my career is in ruins, and I miss you every day. We could start over. Please, John. He deleted the message before it finished, just as he had with all the others. Some bridges once burned should remain ash. The Ashworth family had made their choice 15 years ago when they decided he wasn't good enough for their daughter. Now they were living with the consequences. John finished his coffee and grabbed his jacket. He had a construction site to oversee, dinner plans with Sarah, and a future that was finally completely his own. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.